Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
So today we're diving into a really essential collection of essays by Hannah Arendt, Men in Dark Times.
Yeah, and this is a profound one. It's a journey, really, through the lives of these individuals who, they were up against the absolute worst political catastrophes of the 20th century.
And somehow they managed to strike a light for humanity. That's the core of it.
Okay, let's unpack that title first, Men in Dark Times. Because Arendt isn't just giving us a history lesson here, is she? She's using these figures, Lessing, Luxemburg, Jaspers, Benjamin, as, moral flashlights.
That's a great way to put it. Moral flashlights. And she specifically borrows the phrase dark times from a Bertolt Brecht poem, To Posterity.
Oh, that's where it comes from.
Yes. And for her, it defines this era of not just tragedy, but a kind of systemic failure. The darkness for Arendt is more than just the obvious horrors of war and totalitarianism. It's structural.
Okay, so what is that structural definition? What makes the times dark beyond the violence?
The key is that the darkness isn't just a collection of bad acts by bad people. It's the systemic extinguishing of light in the public realm. The darkness is the deliberate, organized obfuscation of reality.
The public realm. So that's the space where we're supposed to see what's going on, the space of appearance where truth comes out. So where is this darkness, this contamination coming from?
Well, Arendt says it emanates from the establishment, from the system itself. She points right at what she calls the highly efficient talk and double talk that official representatives use.
So it's not just lying, it's more than that.
It's way more than that. It's institutionalized. It's a constant, relentless effort to explain away unpleasant facts, to rationalize every concern, to just systematically cover up what's actually happening.
So the darkness is really the success of making truth invisible. The public sphere, which should be lit up by shared facts, by discourse, gets polluted by these official stories that create what she calls credibility gaps.
Credibility gaps, invisible government, all of these things, the language of the system just stops revealing what's happening. Instead, it sweeps reality under the carpet.
And when they use moral language, like talking about venerable old truths, what does that do?
That's the most corrosive part. It degrades all truth. It makes everything feel like a meaningless triviality. And that just annihilates the public space. That space where people can show, in deed and word, for better and worse, who they are and what they can do.
The public light is extinguished, shared meaning is gone.
That's the darkness.
But here's where it gets so interesting, because Arendt isn't just sitting in the shadows. She's actively looking for the sparks. So what's our mission here, then, in this deep dive? What are we looking for?
Our mission is really centered on Arndt's core belief, which is, well, even in the absolute darkest of times, we have to expect some kind of illumination.
And it doesn't come from where you'd expect.
Not at all. Critically, she insists this light comes less from big, abstract systems or from academic theories. It comes from the uncertain, flickering, and often weak light that is kindled by specific men and women.
So these are people who, just by how they lived their lives, by the integrity of their work, they lit up their own little slice of history.
They lit up the time span given to them on Earth, yes.
Okay, so for you, the listener, this deep dive is going to be less about policy failures or historical timelines. It's much more about moral clarity, about public responsibility.
We're looking at how individual integrity can act as this kind of moral reference point when all the systemic certainty, all the shared truths just completely collapse around you.
It's about the quality of the person, their humanitas, not their ideology.
That's it exactly. We're looking for the people who risk their person in the public realm.
Okay, to set the stage for that, we should probably place Hannah Arendt herself. Her own life is the context for all of this. Born in Germany in 1906, she fled Nazism and became, well, one of the most important political thinkers of the century.
With massive works like The Origins of Totalitarianism, where she tried to make sense of the death camps and the human condition, just foundational texts.
So what historical moment is this particular collection, Men in Dark Times, coming out of?
It's a post-totalitarian reflection. Arendt was a Jewish refugee, a survivor, and she was grappling with these catastrophic, completely unexpected failures of the first half of the century. So these essays were written mostly in America over about 12 years.
And they were often responses to things, right? An obituary, a new book.
Exactly, the commemoration. She's looking back at her contemporaries. People like Lessing, Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Jaspers, Walter Benjamin, Bertolt Brecht. People who had to navigate this systemic collapse.
And it's so important to note her intention here. She says she didn't choose them because they were mouthpieces of the zeitgeist,
Right. Not because they represented the spirit of the age.
but because their lives and their work actually resisted being totally conditioned by their time.
That emphasis on the person over the issue is absolutely central to her whole method. She's looking for people whose essence just could be crushed by the totalizing forces of history and ideology.
Why biography, though? Why not just write about the theories?
Because Arendt believed that in truly dark times, when everything abstract, everything institutional has failed you, the life itself becomes the proof of integrity.
So how does that actually look in the book?
The book focuses on how they lived, how they moved in the world. She's trying to see this complete unity of life and world through the prism of a great character. She's not interested in their inner psychology,
It's about how they appeared in the world.
how they appeared and how they functioned in the world, yes. And the fact that these essays were so spontaneous, often a eulogy or a review, that just underscores her point. Moral illumination isn't some planned curriculum. It's a sudden light that appears when a person throws their life into the venture into the public realm.
That phrase, the public realm, brings us straight to one of Arendt's most vital distinctions for this whole book, the difference between private life and that public realm. Can you define what she means by the public realm?
So the public realm is the space of appearances. It's the stage for politics. It's the shared world where people meet, where they interact. And this is the critical part, where they can show in deed and word, for better and worse, who they are and what they can do.
So its main job is to throw light on the affairs of men.
When it's healthy, yes.
Yes.
It's the political sphere, the polis, where your actions and your words are visible and, crucially, can be remembered.
But Arendt sees this trend, especially in the modern West, of people retreating from that space. They use their freedom from politics to just withdraw into the private sphere. Home, work, their own thoughts. Why did she see that happening?
Well, she saw that mass society, the nature of modern work, it made the public realm feel increasingly anonymous, hostile even, irrelevant to your actual life.
So the private sphere became a refuge.
It became the place you could find authenticity. You could be truly yourself at home, protected from the exposure and the judgment of the political world. But she argues this withdrawal has a real, measurable, structural cost.
A cost to reality itself. And that cost is the loss of the in-between. This is such a crucial concept for her. What is this in-between that decays when we all retreat into our private lives?
The in-between is the common world. It's the shared reality that's created by our interactions, by our speech, by things we build together. It's what links us and separates us at the same time.
Like the table we all sit around.
That's a perfect analogy, the table. It's the laws, the customs, the institutional memory, the shared facts we can agree on. It's the space where we can have different opinions without destroying the table itself. Arendt sees the retreat from public life as an almost demonstrable loss to the world.
So when we all retreat, we might cultivate our private genius or find our own happiness, but the structure holding us all together, that starts to suffer.
The world itself suffers. It loses its permanence. It loses its ability to illuminate.
Because the world needs that continuity, right? Human lives are short, mortal.
Exactly. That continuity rests on the political order, on what Arendt calls the pillars of the best-known truths. If those pillars shatter, if the in-between disappears because everyone is just hiding away or working in isolation, the political order dissolves.
And the world becomes inhuman.
Inhospitable to mortals, because there's no shared, stable stage for human action and memory anymore. The fragility of our shared reality really gets exposed when people collectively decide the public sphere just isn't worth the risk or the effort.
Okay, that context really sets up the core ideas we see in the people she profiles. Let's start with Gotthold Ephraim Lessing. He's an 18th century Enlightenment figure, but Ernst treats him like a contemporary. The idea she pulls from him is independent thinking, or Selbstdenken.
Yes, Selbstdenken. And for Lessing, it's not just thinking for yourself. It's a form of freedom of movement that you choose when political action is basically impossible.
Right. He was living in 18th century Germany, which he called the most slavish country in Europe.
And he pointed out the irony. He could publish as many idiocies against religion as he wanted, but he couldn't raise a voice for the rights of subjects against extortion and despotism.
So he couldn't act politically. His hands were tied.
His hands were tied, so he retreated into thought.
But you said earlier this isn't a stoic retreat. It's not just giving up on the world. What's the difference?
The difference is critical. It's retreating into thought that is still concerned with the world. The Stoic retreats into himself to find inner peace, to disconnect from external events. Lessing is the opposite. He gives up the desire for final solutions or absolute conclusions precisely because he is still passionately concerned with the world, with human interaction.
He wasn't looking for the one big truth with a capital T that would end all arguments.
Absolutely not. He wanted no one to coerce him, not by force and not even by proofs. And this is key. He refused to coerce himself by building some perfectly consistent system that would just fix his identity and stop his thinking from moving.
So his goal was to scatter what he called fermenta cognitionis.
Seeds of knowledge, yeah. To stimulate other people to think for themselves. He was totally fine with his ideas contradicting each other if it meant keeping the conversation alive.
So the real point of his writing, of his thought, wasn't to deliver a final answer, it was to create discourse. The dialogue itself becomes the political act.
That's exactly it. That's the political nature of his thinking. It anticipates and it invites a dialogue with other people, and that dialogue is what creates the world, the shared reality. If truth were just some single fixed object, it would kill the political space between us.
And this focus on dialogue leads us right into this contrast she draws between two models of community that pop up in dark times: fraternity and friendship. This is one of the most useful things in the whole book.
It really is. So fraternity or brotherhood, you often see this among persecuted groups, among pariah peoples. Arendt says it comes from a shared sense of injury, a shared hatred of the outside world that's treating them inhumanly.
And it creates this kind of emotional warmth.
It does. A physical warmth among people packed closely together. It can lead to a real kindliness and vitality within that group.
That sounds like a good thing, a necessary thing for survival. So why does Arendt call it absolutely irrelevant in political terms?
Because it exists in darkness, and it dissolves the second it's brought into the light. The warmth of the pariahs is a psychological substitute for a public world, but it comes at the cost of worldlessness. Your senses that respond to the world, like common sense and taste, they start to atrophy.
It's an internal refuge, but it can't function politically.
It can't. And Arendt says something chilling. She says the humanity created among the persecuted has never survived the hour of liberation by so much as a minute. It collapses because it was built on shared suffering or shared hatred, not a shared joy in the world.
Which is where friendship, philia, comes in. And it's totally different. It's selective, not egalitarian, and it's deeply political.
Deeply political. For the Greeks, the whole essence of friendship was discourse, talking about the common world. Friendship is about humanizing what is happening around you, and it requires sharing joy, which Arendt says is far superior to sharing suffering.
Oh, my joy.
Because joy is communicative, it's talkative. It encourages the kind of dialogue that is entirely permeated by pleasure in the other person and what he says. Friendship for her is this passionate openness to the world and love of it. It sustains the public realm because you're actively engaged in it.
And this brings us back to Lessing's most radical idea about all this, the relationship between truth and humanity. Arendt says he was willing to sacrifice truth for friendship, but how do you square that with needing shared facts? I mean, if we just sacrifice truth, aren't we just opening the door to chaos, to that mere talk you mentioned earlier?
That's the challenge, right? But Arendt is talking about philosophical or religious truth, the final, absolute, capital T truth that claims to end all debate. Lessing actually rejoiced that the genuine ring of truth, if it had ever existed, had been lost.
So he wasn't denying verifiable facts. He was denying the one single doctrine that explains everything.
Exactly. For him, having one absolute truth that settles everything would be the end of humanity, because it would eliminate the need for speech, for discourse, for individual judgment.
The danger wasn't disagreement then. The danger was a kind of forced total unity under one banner.
That's it. The world is formed in the spaces between us, in our variety. If everyone united in one single opinion, the world would vanish altogether. It would be as if, she says, not men in their infinite plurality, but man in the singular were to inhabit the earth. Politics, by definition, requires plurality.
And Lessing's conclusion on this is just, it's perfect. He says, jeder sage, was ihm Wahrheit dünkt, und die Wahrheit selbst sei Gott empfohlen.
Let each man say what he deems truth, and let truth itself be commended unto God. It's the ultimate rejection of the tyranny of compulsion, whether that's from force or from a so-called perfect philosophical proof.
And Arendt loves this because it shows a conscience that would reject any idea, any doctrine that would make friendship between two people impossible.
Yes, the human condition is plurality. Any system, any idea that denies that is, for Arendt, fundamentally inhuman.
Okay, let's move from Lessing, the thinker who retreated into thought, to Rosa Luxemburg. early 20th century revolutionary plunged right into political action. Arendt calls her the manliest of them all.
She does. And she identifies Luxemburg's core commitment as a moral one. She was focused on reality even more than on the mechanics of revolution.
How did that integrity show up in her political life?
Well, Luxemburg was really unusual for a Marxist because her political engagement was rooted in this passionate observation of the world, even outside of strict working-class interests. She was always in friction with society, writing about colonial abuses, for example.
Because she felt if she just stuck to the orthodox theory, the revolutionary spirit would dry up.
It would dry up, yeah. It would be cut off from the changing reality of the world. And her greatest theoretical contribution actually came from this commitment to observing reality, even when it contradicted the accepted system.
You're talking about her critique of capitalism.
Right. Classical Marxist theory said capitalism was a closed system that would collapse from its own contradictions. But Luxemburg looked at the world, at global imperialism, and saw something different.
The third man theory.
Exactly. She argued that capitalism wasn't closed at all. It needed to constantly feed on pre-capitalist sectors to survive. It had to constantly expropriate external economies to keep moving.
Which went against the classical dialectic, but it perfectly described the reality of imperialism.
It did, and Arnold points out that Luxemburg included this chilling description of the torture of Negroes in South Africa in her main book on imperialism. That wasn't a side note for her. It was essential to her economic theory. It proved that you had to be faithful to the suffering happening in the world, even outside your core focus, to actually grasp the system.
And this commitment to reality, to not being a dogmatist, that translated into her theory of revolution itself, spontaneous action over rigid organization.
Her big insight, which she got from the 1905 Russian Revolution, was that revolution is spontaneous. Action comes from below, it erupts from the people, and organization is the product of that action, not something imposed from above by an elite party.
She didn't trust the Bolshevik model.
Not at all. She profoundly believed that salvation lay only in the school of public life itself, the most unlimited, the broadest democracy, and public opinion. She thought the Bolshevik reliance on terror and centralization actually demoralized everyone. For her, the unpredictability of human action was the only authentic source of revolutionary power, and that's something systems always try to stamp out.
Okay, finally in this section, let's turn to Walter Benjamin. He's facing this complete, irreparable break in tradition. The past can't be handed down anymore. So how does he try to save it? Arendt calls him the pearl diver of the past.
Benjamin knew the break in tradition was absolute. He couldn't just write a history book and pretend there was continuity. So he had to find these new, almost surgical ways of dealing with the past. And his unique method was this: citability replaces transmissibility.
Citability replaces transmissibility. That's an incredible phrase. What does that surrealist approach actually look like?
Well, Arndt uses this amazing image. She says Benjamin's quotations are like robbers by the roadside who make an armed attack and relieve an idler of his convictions.
Wow.
His work was about tearing fragments, a forgotten, quote, a piece of urban trash, an old advertisement out of their original context and arranging them in a new way, a surrealistic montage, to create a sudden flash of meaning. His dream was to write a book made up entirely of quotations.
So it's a violent act against the old context, but it's an act of preservation against total destruction.
That's it exactly. And the pearl diver metaphor ties it all together. He goes down to the depths of the past, not to excavate it all nicely, but to pry loose the rich and the strange, the pearls and the coral, and just lift them abruptly into the present.
And to do that, you have to do violence to their context.
You have to. But it's the only way to save these fragments from being swept away by the big official narratives of history, the stories written by the victors. It's how he salvages meaning, by destroying the accepted order.
This brings us right into the systems perspective, how this darkness is produced structurally. Arendt is so clear that dark times aren't just about bad morals. They are created by the dynamics of systems trying to control and obscure human freedom.
Right. And when the light of the public realm is put out by this camouflage from the establishment, the political sphere becomes dominated by what Arendt calls mere talk. She borrows the term Jared from Heidegger.
Mere talk. That is such a precise critique. It's not just lying or propaganda. It's something more pervasive. What does mere talk sound like today?
Mere talk is language that just annihilates meaning through sheer volume and repetition, no matter what its factual basis is. It just arises irresistibly out of the public realm and takes over everything. Think of endless talking points, reflexive ideological sound bites, corporate jargon that just hides human reality.
It's the kind of talk that reduces every complex issue, every unique human story, to this incomprehensible, predictable triviality.
Exactly. Everything authentic is just assaulted by this overwhelming, senseless noise. The result is a world where sense and nonsense are basically neutralized. They sound the same.
And Arndt points out that the only escape from this that philosophers like Heidegger offer is withdrawal. Go into solitude. Get away from the political realm.
A withdrawal that she fundamentally rejects as a loss of humanitas. And this brings us to Hermann Brock, one of the writers she profiled, who actually tried to build a system to fight back against all this.
Right. Brock was searching for an earthly absolute. He wanted to restore those shattered pillars of the best-known truths with a new unifying system of thought.
Yes, a really intense, lifelong search. He wanted to combat what he called anarchy, with the necessity of cognition, like you find in science or math. He tried to apply that necessity to human affairs, to make politics an ethical work of art.
So he treated political acting like making something, where the end goal justifies the means.
And Arndt argues that applying that kind of systemic ends-driven logic to politics is it's ruinous.
Why? Why is it so ruinous?
Because the very core of true political action is the absolute unpredictability of human actions. When you build a house, you know what the end product will be. The means serve that end. But when people act in the political realm, their actions intersect with everyone else's intentions in this infinite, uncontrollable web.
The consequences are never fully contained.
Never. A system has to assume either isolated individuals or a single collective will. But the human world is an infinitude of interfering intentions. So the whole ends-means category, which is essential for any system that wants control, is ruinous when applied to acting.
The moment you introduce human freedom and plurality, the system that tries to control the outcome just falls apart. It can't predict the future that's being born out of these unique actions.
That's it. In politics, the means, the act of starting something, the speech, the promise, the integrity of the action itself, that's always the decisive factor, not the unpredictable end. Systems just cannot accommodate that freedom.
So if systems fail, and they often create the darkness, the individual has to step up to become the moral reference point. And we see this so powerfully in the figure of Karl Jaspers during the Third Reich.
Jasper's function, especially when all the institutions were collapsing, was his inviolability. He was persecuted, he was a dissident philosopher married to a Jewish woman, but his sheer strength and his confidence in reason gave people assurance that reason itself couldn't be annihilated as long as reasonable men still existed.
He stood alone.
He stood alone, independent of all the groups and parties, and yet he provided this powerful light just by staying true to his own commitment to intellectual freedom.
And Arndt makes this really crucial contrast here between collective power and individual strength. How do those two things work together or against each other?
Power, for Arendt, only arises where people act together. It's collective. And no amount of individual strength is ever great enough to replace it. Strength will always eventually succumb to power.
Right.
But individual strength, like the sheer strength to escape and to resist, that only materializes if you are constantly acknowledging reality, not ignoring it. During the Nazi years, the temptation to just ignore the blabber of the regime and retreat into your own noble thoughts was immense.
But if you do that, if you yield to that temptation, you lose your humanness along with your grip on reality.
That is the core danger. If you ignore the political reality, you can't fight it. You lose your footing in the common world. Jasper's strength came from constantly acknowledging the horrific reality he was resisting. His resistance was based on communication and reality, not on abstract, solitary philosophy.
Which speaks to the failure of abstract ideology in general. The old truths shattered, and then came what Arndt calls the most frightful errors of the 20th century.
Ideology from the 19th or 20th century was just completely insufficient when the whole political order was wrenched into this constant motion with no permanence. And we see this so vividly, tragically, in Bertolt Brecht.
His intelligence, she says, broke like lightning through the rumble of Marxist platitudes.
He was cynical enough to see the hypocrisy of ideology, but he was also dedicated enough to a cause to try and serve it.
So what was his tragedy?
His tragedy happened when he tried to subordinate his poetry completely to politics. When he tried to be in the thick of it by moving to East Germany, his commitment to the Communist Party demanded he be a partisan. But reality overwhelmed him.
He couldn't be its voice anymore.
He couldn't. The ideological system required him to lie, and being that close to the machinery of power destroyed his ability to illuminate the truth in his work.
Proving that even the most engaged artist needs some distance from the system to maintain clarity. The system devours the very light it claims to serve.
Precisely. Clarity requires a distance that allows for judgment. And judgment is impossible when you are fully inside the system's talk and double talk.
So if we take Arndt's critique of dark times and we look at our own moment, I mean, some of these patterns are just immediately recognizable, especially around truth and shared reality.
This is where Lessing's conflict becomes so contemporary. Arendt suggests that people today are obsessed with being right, which comes from a scientific, objective framework. It's decided by data-driven facts.
And this has displaced the search for truth.
Yes, the search for truth, which was historically more of a philosophical or religious question about shared meaning and values.
But wait, what's wrong with trying to be right? In an age of disinformation, surely we need objectivity and facts.
Of course, they're essential. The problem comes when objectivity, being right by a specific metric, becomes an absolute moral duty that demands you sacrifice your humanity. People who are obsessed with rightness often violate a higher duty to humanity for the sake of that objectivity.
They feel like if they accommodate human feelings or friendship, they're violating some kind of intellectual purity.
Exactly. Arendt says they can even feel ashamed of their humanity when they act otherwise.
Can you give us a modern example of that? Where does being right risk sacrificing humanity?
Well, think about ethical conflicts that come up when policymakers or data scientists have absolute statistical certainty about a plan that will cause severe human suffering or dislocation. For Arendt, Lessing's question is still the most important one. Would any doctrine, no matter how convincingly proven, be worth sacrificing a single friendship between two people?
And for her, the answer has to be no.
The answer, rooted in humanitas, must be no. Human plurality, the possibility of discourse, has to come before the certainty of any single totalizing doctrine.
Another parallel is information overload. It seems to mimic the mere talk, not through lies necessarily, but just through sheer volume that flattens reality.
Arendt was worried about this back then. She saw the world achieving a shallow unity almost entirely through technical development, global communication, rapid information exchange.
And she saw this global present, which we achieved without a common past or shared culture, as dangerous.
Critically dangerous.
And what's the result of that kind of purely technical unity?
It threatens to make all specific traditions and histories irrelevant. Everything is just instantly available information with no context, no weight, no depth. The result is a horridly shallow unity. And if everything is just instantly available data, the dimension of depth, the historical, cultural context that human thought needs, it just gets destroyed.
It's a leveling down that makes real judgment impossible.
It destroys the complexity and difference that actually constitutes the world.
So, if the systems and the global technical unity are fundamentally shallow, the responsibility comes back to individual courage to maintain that depth, to maintain that plurality.
Absolutely. We have to go back to people like Jaspers, who acquired his humanitas by throwing his life into the venture into the public realm, risking everything. And that venture proves that the personal element in someone, their coherence, their moral strength, it isn't private. It's public. It only appears when you're willing to expose yourself to the light and the risks of the shared world.
And this courage means resisting false identification, even when it would be easier to just retreat into a comfortable abstraction.
This is Arendt a powerful conclusion on political resistance. She said you have to resist the identity that a hostile world forces on you in terms of the identity that is under attack.
So during the Third Reich, if you were stopped and asked, "Who are you?" the only adequate reply was,
A Jew.
"Ooh."
To evade that by saying, I am not a Jew, I am merely a man, that universal abstraction, she called that a grotesque and dangerous evasion of reality.
Because it denies the political reality of the persecution itself, and it denies the essential plurality of the human condition.
Exactly. True humanist, true humanitas meant being able to say a German and a Jew and friends. To maintain that friendship in the face of persecution wasn't denying the political distinction the Nazis imposed. It was actively defying the law that prohibited it.
It was achieving a bit of humanness in a world become inhuman.
And the strength to do that only comes when you constantly acknowledge reality as the thing you have to escape or defy, not ignore.
Let's connect these ideas explicitly to our core themes here at Crisis and Perception. I mean, the whole concept of dark times is Arndt's analysis of the collapse of shared meaning and the denial of plurality.
Absolutely. When systems, especially totalitarian ones, try to impose uniformity, they are structurally failing the human condition. They try to make it seem, she says, as though not men in their infinite plurality, but man in the singular were to inhabit the earth. This denial that we are born unique is the root of the political disaster.
The system wants to replace the individual with the type.
And if the world is the thing that forms in the spaces between people in all their variety, the result of that drive for uniformity is that the shared world just vanishes. You're left with isolated, anxious individuals facing a massive, incomprehensible system.
It dissolves entirely.
Political order is based on different people having different opinions, what the Greeks called doxa,
Hmm.
and talking about those differences. When one single truth dominates the discourse, the critical distance between people vanishes, and the common world that rests on those spaces vanishes with it.
Which highlights the danger of abstraction and solitude, which links back to this philosophical tradition of just retreating from the messy political world.
And you see this stark contrast with Jasper's. His idea of limitless communication, where truth and communication are basically the same thing, they only emerge between people. He fiercely protested against solitude. He saw it as pernicious because it's detached from the responsibility of engaging with the world.
So the takeaway is that thinking can't be some private performance for a genius. It has to be a practical thing, a practice between people. It demands responsibility.
Precisely. Abstract thinking without responsibility tends toward the inhuman. The intellectual has to keep returning to the public sphere, accepting that his personality, his humanus, must be risked in the light of the public realm,
Just like Lessing risked his consistency and Jaspers risked his life.
which confirms that the source of moral clarity, of illumination, is fundamentally plural. It's conversational. It's not dictated by a system or a dogma.
Systems can't generate it.
They can't. They're built on necessity and predictability. Moral clarity has to be generated by the constant, incessant, and continual discourse among individuals about the world. And that clarity is found not in some fixed absolute content, but in what Arendt, borrowing from Kant, called the enlarged mentality of reason.
The ability to see from the perspective of others?
Yes, the faculty that seeks to clarify and illuminate by taking the perspective of others, by remaining open to dispute and disagreement for the sake of the world.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what does Men in Dark Times ultimately help us see differently? About our own time, about political existence?
I think Arendt's portraits teach us where to look for that flickering light. You look for it in human action, in responsibility, in the sheer integrity of a life that's lived publicly. It really transforms how we think about historical judgment. It turns it into an exercise in political wisdom.
And it teaches us that real greatness, even in art or philosophy, it only appears when you sense the person behind the work, a being that remains greater and more mysterious than the thing they made.
And the ultimate lesson then is about humanitas itself, the quality of being fully human in the world.
It's not achieved in solitude.
Not in solitude, not through isolated genius. It's achieved in the willingness to risk your person in the public realm through speech and action. It's that quality that's valid without being objective, acquired only by throwing your life into the political venture and maintaining that commitment to plurality, even when unity seems so much safer or stronger.
And Arndt's work gives us a way to reconcile ourselves to the past. Not to master it with some ideology or guilt, but to reconcile with it. And that's achieved through narration and lament.
Which transforms that chaotic network of individual acts into a significant whole, something we can share and remember.
And that leads to illumination, which matters more than simple optimism.
Infinitely more. Illumination is that tragic pleasure of being able to accept that something terrible could have happened, moving beyond paralyzing indignation into real knowledge, and then waiting to see what comes of knowing and enduring. It's accepting reality while refusing to be extinguished by it.
That's a powerful point of reflection for you, the listener. When our own pillars of the best-known truths lie shattered, whether they're political, economic, or social, Arndt suggests the advantage is a new kind of thinking, moving freely without the crutches of ideology or dogma.
So the provocative final thought for you is this. What responsibility do you retain toward the world when certainty collapses? And how do you maintain the incessant and continual discourse of humanity in a world that is constantly threatening to unite in a single inhuman opinion?
We have been exploring Hannah Arendt's essential collection of essays, Men in Dark Times. We highly encourage you to read the book yourself or borrow it from a library to explore these profiles in depth. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.